Okay, so we're going live. Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. All right, let's start, you guys. Welcome to another LinkedIn Live lunch session by the EODF. Today on the topic of balancing performance, impact, and happiness. And we will be diving into self-management today with Semco Style. One of the, let's say, like the earlier adopters, because self-management is nothing new, right? It has been around for a long time, but this is a remarkable inspirator, or Ricardo Semler was a remarkable inspirator for a lot of people in that field. So I'm very happy to introduce today two wonderful people. First of all, Pietro Antolini from Verona, Italy, who is a consultant, a co-founder of a consulting company in North Italy, and a passionate freediver. Benvenuti, Pietro.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. Yeah.
All right, and let's first also get Lissy on stage. Welcome, Lissy Benton from the picturesque city of Stamford in the UK, where also some movies are shot, right? Lissy is a company culture coach and also podcast host, a speaker, and also many different. You are holding many different roles. Let's put it in that way. Just as Pietro as well. And there's two things I think that really connect you two. And one of them, you're both at the forefront of exploring new ways of working. Like what would be like, what are, the best ways of doing things? And the other one is also you have been closely associated with the Semco Style Institute and kind of like, found your match, let's put it in that way. But we will go into that a little deeper during the session. So welcome, you two. It's great having you here.
Yeah, thanks, Tina.
And I think it would be great if you just say a couple of things about yourself so people know if they can trust you or not, right? You know how it works. and then we can dive deeper into the topic. Who wants to go first?
Pietro, I'll let you go first because you're way more fun with the free diving.
Oh, yeah, the free diving thing is always interesting for people, but yeah, I will stick to more professional parts for now. So yeah, I'm an engineer, so let's start with something that you can agree or not, or you can like or not, but I come from an engineering background. My first passion in management and philosophy of how to manage a company has been lean. So lean methodologies and Toyota production system, continuous improvement is something that I really like. And so that was my first big passion from university on. And I got to be a consultant on lean methodologies. And it's where everything started for me, because I was trying to apply new techniques and new practices in different contexts. And I found out that, not every time the situation was ready for those kind of things. And a lot of projects were failing. So that's where my search for something new started, let's say 7-8 years ago. And I've been experimenting and searching on the topic since. And experimenting first with a group of friends and colleagues. We became a small self-managed group, so we practiced a lot on ourselves. And then I found some crazy entrepreneurs and managers that decided to join me in these experiments, especially here in the Italian market, where we don't have so many examples of self-management. So I work mostly with small and medium companies, because I'm in the northeast of Italy. So a lot of family-owned companies and cooperatives and small and medium-sized businesses. So that's where I come from.
Very nice. Thank you. Lissy.
Yes. Hello, everybody. And thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm really excited to dive into this topic today, because I am, first and foremost, just a massive geek and nerd about anything to do with self-management or new ways of working. So as soon as I get an opportunity to come and talk about it, or to share and have a conversation about it with like-minded people, then I get really excited. So I am a company culture coach. I have been doing culture for about 6 years now. I started my business back in 2018. And really my journey started through the traditional route, I suppose, of Frederick Laloux, Reinventing Organisations. And when I read that book, it felt to me like a veil had been lifted on the way work is. And I thought, why on earth are we not doing more of this? And I was just absolutely obsessed. And so I really started to follow that path, because I'd been previously doing culture in a much more traditional way. And it wasn't until I'd read Reinventing Organisations that my mind had been opened. And so I started to explore all of the different things that Laloux talks about. I sort of dabbled in a little bit of holacracy, really wanted to look at all the different ways that people were doing this. And so that's what I've been doing ever since, really. And I've started to practice and experiment with lots of different companies here in the UK, startups and small businesses who are all really eager to kind of do something a bit different that changes the status quo. And I discovered obviously Semco Style through the work of Ricardo Semler as well. So that was on that journey. And I kind of became certified a few years ago now. And I've just really enjoyed being able to use that toolkit and those practices. So I really like the holistic approach of everything that I've been very privileged to experience. And I'm hoping that I can share some of that today.
Amazing. Thank you two so much for being here. And maybe I should also say a couple of lines about myself, because obviously I'm not obviously, I mean, a lot of people don't know me, I guess, in the EUDF community yet, but I'm not unbiased, let's say. I have my fair share of self-management experience myself. Got into the space in 2016 and experimented 5 years in an organization. I was, also pushing a transformation towards holacracy and the for-purpose enterprise forward. And I also have to say, I also got in touch with the shadow side. So I will be asking a lot of critical questions today as well. So I'm really excited about that. And maybe to start, for the people who have not been in touch with the topic of self-management, or some people playing with the terms of self-management and self-organization, would you have a definition to these terms? Because I have to admit there's quite some research out there, but there's also different kind of understandings. And also I have to say, cross borders, we have different kind of understandings about these terms. When I think about Germany and, compared to the United States or so. So if you would like to share a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that the start is something scientific, not linked with the organization. So the self-organizing environments or self-organizing organisms or groups of organisms is something that is not related to business theories, but is more related to science theories. So that is the starting point. So it's a system that is organizing itself. And so we can look at group of fishes or birds, and they self-organize in a way. They have some very simple rules that generate a bigger effect and a bigger behavior. And so this is the origin of the term in scientific term. Then self-management is something different. And on that specific name, I think we have a lot of different definitions, and we have self-management, self-directed, and so on. So we also have some variations on that. And I would like to add two definitions from my side, but then I will leave Lizzie her definitions, or what she likes. So for me, one is a definition that I think is in Freedom Inc. in the book, probably, and is I think that is called continuous teaching of freedom and accountability, or something like that. So self-management is a journey of accountability and freedom. So that's something that I really like as a definition, because it truly is, and it's both at personal level and a company level. And yeah, and the other definition that I like is the Semco Style one. The self-management is one of the principles that we go after. And the definition is you have some autonomy when you work in an organization, and self-management just means that you can increase that autonomy. So it's a very simple definition, and you can start wherever you're starting, because at least some space of action you already have at any role in any organization.
Yeah, I would agree with Pietro's definitions as well. So self-organizing being that.
Oh, I think Lizzie's breaking up, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, Lizzie is frozen. Okay, no, let's see if she's coming back. But she already said, like, she agrees to what you're saying, so that was an easy one, Pietro.
Yeah. So I got some expected at least. So yeah, but as I said, self-management is I don't really like the extremes. So sometimes self-management is seen as a thing in itself that you have to pursue, or you have to become self-managed, and that is a goal in itself. And if you become too extremist on this idea of self-management, for me, you're not on the right direction. It's just one way of doing things, and you have to understand if that is for you and that is for the challenges that your organization is living. So
that's an interesting one, what you're touching here, because I feel like I've come across that quite a lot, like that in the space. It's about, because also this like teal organization, it's about becoming or aspiring something that we want to be as an organization, and it can really counteract as well, right? And it can completely go in a different direction, as you say. People are almost becoming like idealistic about it, right?
Yeah.
So, but Lizzie is back. So Lizzie, what did you want to add to Pietro's definition of self-organization and self-management?
Yes, thank you. And apologies, I don't know what happened there. So yeah, I would agree with Pietro. So self-organizing is where that entity doesn't have somebody telling it how to organize itself. It has that kind of natural instinct and ability. Whereas obviously self-management is something that we see. I believe it's around that, we have choice, autonomy, and some decision-making power within that group dynamic. So yeah, I would 100% agree with Pietro's definitions, and he probably did them a lot more eloquently than I did.
Yeah, but we were just saying that the risk of self-management is to become idealistic and to see it as a objective or something that you have to reach. And yeah, we're agreeing with Tina that it's not a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is. And I think sometimes with it kind of getting interchanged, especially with the practice of self-management as well, you can still have some layers of hierarchy, and that still exists in some organizations. So it doesn't, I think sometimes there is this myth that self-management is completely no hierarchy, which is interesting.
Oh, that's also an interesting point to go in. I just wanted to say, like, so I read this article, and it's research from Fanish Puranam, who did a lot of research around the topic of decentralized work, and he practically distinguished, and I say just like a little bit, like I won't go into depth here now, but that what Pietro said, like self-organization is more like about this like spontaneous emergence, right, of order within a system. And this is very rare in organizations, because if we look at self-management, we have somewhat like a predefined structure that we are part in, but within that structure, we are self-managed in terms of we are making decisions how to control our work and how we are collaborating and these kind of things. So just like to maybe, go from there to the next topic, because I think you already touched a lot of interesting topics, and I'm making notes here because I think there's a lot of what you said. There's a lot of myth around that with self-management, like, oh my gosh, it's anarchy. I don't know, like depending who you talk to. But that self-management also exists in hierarchical structures, right? And that we have different kind of structures and concepts we can go in, like, so market-based dynamics, for example. We have like these small self-managed teams. Some might not say this is self-management even, right? But if we like, obviously you did a great deal of experimenting and looking into different kind of approaches in the field. What makes Semco for you like stand out, and why are you attracted to Semco, let's say, and maybe also in comparison to what you have experienced in the field, in maybe also examples if you have?
You want to go first, do you think?
Yeah, I would say that I think what attracted me to Semco Style was its non-dogmatic approach. I think a lot of the time we're always looking for a blueprint or a rule book to follow, as it were. We want to know what every single step should be. And I found that, with Semco Style, it's very holistic in its approach and very experimental as well. So you can really tap into the practices and the framework and the roadmap in a much more natural way that benefits the business. Because, a lot of the time, if we're really obsessed by a dogma or a framework, we're not actually treating the business as the unique entity that it is. And so what I've found is that actually it helps me to look at the business and apply different practices that are really relevant for where they are actually at, not kind of, oh, this is the kind of thing I'm going to try and imprint on you. So that's what really attracted me to Semco Style. And I suppose that's what I've seen in terms of, if I had to compare it to other practices, it's less rigid, I would say, which I really like. And I feel that, no matter where a business or an organization is, they can pick something up and have a practice with it. They don't have to go the whole hog, as we say.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you maybe say a little bit loud, because we completely skipped that question. I just figured, like, what is Semco Style actually?
Oh, okay. I can go on that. So Semco Style is an idea that that came into the mind of some consultants in the Netherlands, and they looked at Ricardo's experience in Semco in Brazil, and they were fascinated by that, as we did when we read Maverick or the 7-Day Weekend, and they were looking at Semco and thinking, how can we take this experience and bring to other companies? And so that's why they got in contact with Ricardo and asked him if they could create a platform, a space where all this knowledge could be shared and organized. And this is the beginning of Semco Style in 2016. Luckily, Ricardo joined this initiative, and so this is where it all started. And I would like to thank these guys, because when they tried to copy Semco, they didn't do the same errors that we did in the past. For example, on lean management that I come from, we tried to copy Toyota, and we made a mess at the beginning for the first decades. Not for the few first months, but for decades we made mistakes, because we were copying the practices, the things that were visible, but we didn't understand really what was happening in their minds, what was their philosophy. And luckily with Semco Style, we didn't make the same error, because we have the practices, as Lizzie was saying, we can choose different practices, and we can think, is this thing actually useful in this context or not? But at the same time, we have a value base that we can refer to, and we can discuss, and we can get deeper into why do you want to change your organization, what kind of path do you want to follow, what are the important things for your business. And these kind of questions come first in terms of importance before getting into the practices. So that's why it's one of the reasons that I really like the Semco Style approach.
Do you have maybe examples of cases, like to just make it a little bit more tangible, right? Because we're like talking more about like, okay, we have different practices, and I know sometimes it's just not so easy to make methodologies very tangible or approaches. So to just, you know, did you like if we have an example of like a transformation or I don't know, a case where they used the Semco style principles or something, that would be really nice.
Yeah, I'm happy to share one from here in the UK that I'm doing at the moment. So I'm working with a small business who are going through a bit of an evolution because they've had a change of directorship. So a new director, a new CEO has taken over. And they're going through a big sort of culture change because the previous director was very autocratic and the new CEO wants to be a little bit more themselves and kind of change that culture. And that, you know, one of the things that we're talking about as the part, you know, the first step on this journey is actually helping predominantly the managers and the leaders kind of relinquish some of this very autocratic ways of being, that kind of parentile way that we can be. And so one of the practices that we're using to begin with is that step back management. How can we step back slightly to allow people to step in? So we're coaching the managers and the leaders on what this looks like, how does this feel, supporting them in understanding, okay, when's right to step in and when's right to step back, so we can start doing some of this. And then we've also been doing very simple practices, like how do we get just generally more participation and people speaking up in some of the meetings. So we've been doing some meeting practices as well as part of the Semco toolkit. Which, you know, is brilliant, because some of the conversations that I've had already is sometimes the meetings used to be a little bit like there was crickets in the room, because the person at the front of the meeting would talk and then it would just be silence. And then they said to me the other day, Lizzie, we've had so many meetings that are so vibrant now because people are talking and I'm like, and they're just like, you know, this is just from one meeting practice that they're experimenting with. So it just goes to show you don't need to kind of be crazy in some of the things that you change. Even just those little tweaks, turning the dial up here and there, is starting them on that journey.
Yeah, interesting. Pietro, you said you're working with a lot of family-owned companies, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, so I have an example that is similar to Lizzie, because the founders are retiring and the sons are coming in. So they expect different things from their way of working. But at the same time, you have the rest of the company that is still looking at the leaders the same way they were looking at the old leaders. So they expect from the leaders something that is similar. And yeah, as Lizzie was saying, we are starting with small things. One of the things that we did is to create projects that are completely managed by the employees, by the people, without the intervention of the leaders. We just define boundaries for those kind of projects in terms of economics and rules. And from that point on, they can do whatever they want. And one of the things was to change the paintings on the walls, to change the appearance of the offices. And so kind of a sensible, delicate thing to do. And yeah, it went great. So that was kind of an easy example. But I have another one that I would like to bring, is a company that is not doing great. And we've been working with this company for more than a year. And problem is that the different silos inside the company, they were a little bit fighting between each other, and the culture was more like to pointing your finger to your colleague that is not doing the right thing. And so nobody was really taking care of the results except for the owners. And what we had to do, and it's one of the practices that come from Semco Style, and it's called democracy through dictatorship. And what we had to do was to divide the company in smaller groups, and there was no participation in that. It was not all this very nice context where everybody's happy. No, actually it was the opposite. But we had to do it to save the company, and so we created these groups, and we gave these groups all the authority that they need to confront with the customers and to come up with solutions. And it's been a very tough journey because we had to give these groups the numbers. They had to understand the numbers, and we needed the leaders to be there at some point, but also to give some space for these people. But these people were not used to take decisions. So kind of a tough situation, but we are on the right path because we were thinking Semco Style. We were thinking like, okay, this is the right thing to do in this moment. And so we did it, and even if it was a top-down decision, it still has the values and the flavor of we want to get there. We want to have this group to self-manage. So yeah, that's a very tough situation, and I don't know if I would have managed it this way without the ideas coming from Semco Style, because before getting to Semco Style, yeah, I had a lot of knowledge and a lot of a little bit of experience on, I could approach this situation this way, but I didn't have the clarity that I have now, and I was not able to transfer it to the customer at the same way that I can do it now. So
Interesting. And I think in your first example, you also, I mean, like with just like the pictures hanging up and stuff, it's like literally changing the environment, right? But making people change the environment, right? So you're kind of like creating participatory leadership, and in a way that is almost playful, right? But I think oftentimes we speak about we need to adjust, we need to change our environment to actually flourish in that. And I think one component of self-management is that we give people tools in that case, or even have people create their own tools to co-create this kind of environment. How do you see that of importance in that whole process?
Yeah, I feel that it really helps because so often, and I can only really speak from UK experience, change programs happen to people, and that's when we get so much disengagement, and then they're not effective because it's a lot of the time people at the top making decisions and changes that influence the rest of the company that haven't taken any consideration into the team, what the team's experience and context of work looks like. The age-old kind of like, we'll send out an engagement survey, but we won't ever talk to people. It's like them versus us kind of situation. And we see that so often, whereas this is actually engaging with people about what is impacting their work, front and center. So change doesn't become this big scary monster that kind of gets rolled out. It becomes something that is actually supporting people to do better within their actual context. And I think that's what is the real difference here as well. Is too often we're kind of seeing change as this really big scary thing, when actually we can be much more experimental and much more iterative with it.
When you touched the topic of resistance here, right? Would you say that the resistance curve is kind of like going down a little bit in the beginning, or is there a lot of resistance and then it goes down, or does resistance stay? Because I think that's of course that's a hot topic for a lot of consultants, right? How are we getting this curve down?
I'll pass on to Pietro soon because I feel like I'm taking over. But I would say it is coming down, but I think that depends on the context. So, we say at Semco Style that brave leadership is a huge part of Semco Style. We have to be brave, curious, and vulnerable. We have to build that psychological safety in order for us to go on this journey. So, if the leader isn't on board, then we're definitely not going to have a very successful journey together. When it comes to the team, sometimes what I find actually is the people that you think are going to resist it the most are actually sometimes your biggest advocates, because they just haven't been listened to for so long. I remember doing I had a client earlier this year, and the director said to me, Lizzie, I'm not going to give you any feedback. He's like, I think you should hear from one of my team members who is so anti-culture change that he was very vocal, that he was like, oh, not another one of these again. Oh, I don't want this, And then I come in, I was thinking, oh, okay. And then, and he said, this was brilliant. I can't, but this was totally different to what we'd had before. And that shows the difference in how change had been approached before. But Pietro, how about you?
Yeah, I think that in any context, if you have a group of people that is big enough, you're gonna have a resistance. Anything you do, even if you stay there and you don't do anything, you actually are gonna have people resisting, or at least will have tensions of people that want to change. So I don't like to talk about resistance to change. I really prefer to think of how can we do better and discuss the subject openly. And we're gonna have different opinions. Of course, we're gonna have different opinions, but it's a plus for me. It's not a resistance. It's like we are talking about the subject. We are talking about the problems that we have, and how can we address these kind of problems. So I don't really like the rhetoric on this resistance to change is. Yeah, I don't think it's true. And as Lizzie was saying, when you start talking with people, you have different kind of problems, but it really depends a lot of what you've done in the past or what the people are expecting from the leaders. Sometimes you have people silent because they expect the change to come from the leaders. And sometimes you have the leaders that are really resistant to change or resistant to expose themselves of, we can do something different, because they don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, all these kind of situations are normal. And what I really find inspiring is like when you start talking about what can we do, what can we do better. One of the biggest obstacles for me is that we tend to go back to the same ways of doing work, and there's so little culture on different things that we can do that sometimes, even if you don't have that much resistance, you tend to go back to, oh yeah, that's normal that the leader has to do that, or that's normal that the decision has to stay in the board. And so what I really like to do is like to have people know a little bit more what are the possibilities, and from that point on they will start creating solutions that are kind of crazy looking from outside, but they perfectly make sense for them, and you can avoid resistance. But you need to have a variety of solutions. Otherwise, you tend to go back to the two different solutions, and you get back to, one thing is not good for the manager, the other one is not good for the people, and you're stuck there. But actually, there's so much to explore in any possible business problems that you can find.
So it's like almost bringing more light into the black box, right? Because resistance usually comes from, a level of fear, right? From the emotion, and then we just want to more. We want to know more, and if you then provide a couple of options in terms of, hey, there are different kind of opportunities, that's actually very helpful. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a topic I would also like to go into with you guys, and I know time is like running, but when we talk about self-management, so oftentimes what we said in the beginning, it's like, oh yeah, we have a completely flat organizations, bosses are out of the window. We have, I don't know, like some people talk about anarchy, right? It's like, okay, but Lizzie said, well, actually, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is no hierarchy in place, and I would like to go into that topic a little bit as well. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the time in sort of organizations, traditional organizations, we see a very top-down hierarchy happening. We don't get to choose our managers or our bosses, and people sort of tell us what to do. We see a different type of hierarchy exist in alternative ways of working, and that can either be very much that one of the Semco style practices is choose your managers, and it's one of those things where sometimes we need hierarchy. In an essence, we do need leadership, but it's the way that it's facilitated that's vastly different. And so, we see different people stepping into leadership roles. And there can sometimes be, who has the authority or power over what, but it's much more decentralized. And we're no longer playing those power games or those kind of egocentric roles that we see in a lot of traditional organizations. It's much more decentralized. And there's a real intentionality, I believe, behind who has what power?
Yeah.
Pietro, anything
Yeah.
to that?
What I see is like you can find organizations that they have organization charts where you have all the different levels, and then you get into it and you understand that that is there only to ask for holidays and to ask for days off, because actually there's no hierarchy and people are always talking freely, and there's all this hierarchy that is written there. It makes no sense, because actually there's not someone that is taking actions or using force on other people. So this is one situation. And the other one is where you have a full hierarchy where you cannot do anything without asking your boss. And all the decisions, all the discussions end with one person that is saying, okay, we will do this way. So you have all this spectrum of possibilities. And actually especially for bigger organizations, it's necessary that you have links, so you have managers or people that are bringing the opinion of many to another circle or another group. So if you have for example, I'm working with a cooperative of 300 people. And when you have to talk about strategic topics, it's not that you can have 300 people once a month together for an entire day to do that. So you need to have the opinions and you have the voice of a group. And so you will need someone to take on that responsibility. And at the same time, you have to distribute information, you have to distribute some kind of decisions. And so it's good, it's clear, it makes sense to have someone that is taking care of that. But you can make it work also distributing a lot of these kind of typical decisions to the group. So it's not that it's correct in a way or correct in another way. If you want to have a complete self-managed organization, completely flat, you're going to have a group of freelance that they decide together how to contract each other their work. That is one way. So you're managing your money, you're managing your time, you're managing your activities, you're a freelance, right? So that is the full self-managed organization, if you like, but it makes no sense in so many contexts. So and what I'm stressing here is people need to be happy of what they do. So you cannot stress people being a manager or being a leader if they don't want to. So I'm really thinking, like, if you want to have certain amount of space and you can have it in the organization, that's fine. It's working. Okay. So then you can move one way or another, in one direction or another. But the moment you have efficiency of the company and everything's working and the people are happy, that's right, it's working. Now I'm in a cooperative here today and they work with people coming from prison, coming from addictions. And in this context, for example, how can you think of being a fully self-managed organization when everybody's completely autonomous and completely responsible of his own things? You also have a role of helping people to work in a safe environment where they feel that it can fulfill their role without being too stressed. So it's a balance. It's a balance, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, like, I find this case, by the way, very interesting. Like, I'd love to go deeper into that, but I'm afraid we don't have that time today, because it's a lot also about, like, you know, reconnecting and standing in your own power and practically acting out of that with autonomy and direction and clarity, right? And feeling free, but a structure that is actually like making you free, right? So and I mean, if we talk about hierarchy, like my background is my experience background is mostly in holacracy, right? So we had like this purpose hierarchy on the one side, but then we developed these kind of power relationships again. So when you talk about emotional equity, like at some point you get, or emotional oh my gosh, ownership, then you get to also legal ownership at some point and say, okay, this is the next logical step, but not necessarily for everybody, right? So, and there is a very inspiring example when we look at Latro. I don't know, you guys probably also know, maybe not, Latro, the Istanbul-based company. The founder left like 2 years ago the organization, and it completely gained in value and everything. And then because he said it's the only way I can ensure that this company is really, you know, running on self-management, and there is no power structure in there anymore that the founder would be related in, because it's a fundamental power structure when the founder is still in there, because a lot of emotional dependency and a lot of things are playing in there. So I think it's very complex to talk about, okay, we're fully, you know, this or that. And as Pietro said in the beginning, there's like a radical way is not necessarily very healthy, right? And that we also, we come across a lot of idealism in the new way of working space, and if that's about, okay, we need to be fully purpose driven, we need to aspire this, we need to aspire to be like a teal organization, and you know, being completely integrated and holistic. But what does that even mean in our context, right? If we look at our organization, isn't that a completely different social system than your organization? What are my needs? What are your needs? So would you say self-management is an approach that is for everybody? Would you even say there is like examples there it's working well, and there are challenges or limitations to it?
So for me, self-management is something that you have to know, you need to know to make an informed decision. So you, at least you need to know what are the practices of self-management when you are deciding of what you want to change in your company. And so for me, it's like knowing the colors when you are painting. You need to know the colors. Otherwise, you are only painting with 2 or 3 colors, and you are missing out on a lot of things. And so for me, this is the way of looking at organization. So self-management for me, of course, I'm biased. And from my example, from my experience, is the more we go towards that kind of organization, the more we have happy people and we have results, especially with people that want to have freedom to express their abilities. The more we go in that direction, the better. But as I said, it's something that you need to know. You need to know hierarchy, you need to know self-management, you need to decide where you want to position yourself. So how do you want to go after, for example, hiring new people? For me, it's a very hot topic in this period, because hiring someone only from managers and HR resources, it means that you have a group of people working together, and on Monday they will have the new person coming in, and they know nothing about him. And that for me is completely crazy. So you're trying to have a group of people that work together, you're talking about team, and then you drop one person inside and say,
now you're married.
That's the right person for you. And so there are some practices that really don't make sense in any context, in my opinion. So to have participation in people choosing their new colleagues, for me, is something that you have to take from self-management in any context, to avoid discussions and to avoid fights between the team and the managers. It's something that you really need to take from there. But for example, that can be the only thing that you are taking from self-management. You need to know what's in there.
Lizzie, do you have anything to add to that?
I had to write down Pietro's quote first of all. You need to know all the colours you're painting with, because that is just brilliant. And it's so true, because you know, I remember interviewing Daphne and Christian on the podcast, and we were talking about how too often self-management gets put in the bucket of all the latest fads and trends. And you know, everyone's just thinking it's this like new age cool and quirky thing. And it's like, well, no, it's, you know, self-management isn't the goal. It's what you, it's actually what your actual purpose and your goal is as a business. But how will self-management help you get there? So it's not, you know, an end goal within itself. And I think that's sometimes too much of the focus. And so I 100% agree with Pietro. And I think one of the things that comes out for me a lot of the time is that people don't realize that there are practices that they can take and they can still be quite a generally hierarchical company. You know, there are still things that they can do to improve upon. But also one of the things when you mentioned about, is there some people that it just doesn't fit? I would say sometimes there are very deep practices, very highly, that require a high level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that I do feel is uncomfortable for some people. And that's because they haven't yet got to that place themselves. Because, you know, I really believe that it takes a lot of our personal work to step into a fully self-managing organization. I think it takes us to understand what are our own habits, what are our own preferences when it comes to leadership style. So sometimes I think there is, you know, a little bit of a tendency to dismiss some of the more deeper practices that maybe feel a little bit fluffy for people. You know, like meeting check-ins still get sort of joked about as the most cringeworthy thing to do, but I personally think that meeting check-ins are vital. So, you know, you have people on the spectrum of every practice, and it's what works for you.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So as we're like approaching like towards the end, what about like, is there any like favorite practices or tools you would like to recommend to our audience from, you know, the way that you are working with organizations or teams?
I think my one practice that I am a big fan of is roles and responsibilities, because I think the clarity around what people do is really important, and it helps to organize and give everyone clarity on what people's expectations are. I think a lot of the problems when it comes down to accountability and ownership can often be boiled down to the fact that nobody knows who's doing what, and they're stepping on each other's toes. So a personal practice of personal favorite of mine from the Semco Style toolkit is definitely roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, I just gave off one of my favorite, that is participative recruiting, and but the other one that comes to my mind now is let us learn the numbers. So it's a step where you make sure that people know what are the numbers of the company. And I think that too many entrepreneurs are shy of their numbers, and they should not be, because sometimes they are paid themselves less than other people. And so it's a very nice moment where you can open the books and explain to people that where the money are going and how's the company doing, because people look at turnover and they see the company like, oh, the company is doing a lot of money, why they don't invest in this or that, and they don't really understand if there's a profit, if the profit is being invested in something, and why. So yeah, to make this step of taking the weight of the money management from the shoulders of the leaders and to make it clear for everybody is a very good step to start to have this trust and this participation of people.
Amazing. And I see we're already having here a promotion to our problem solving session next week.
Yeah.
So this is a new format where we're trying out, and we invite everybody to join us next week, Wednesday, the 19th of June, from 5 to 6:30 CET time, with Pietro and Lissy and Barry. They say Barry, right? Barry is the not Barry. Barry, okay. We invite everybody for that session to solve problems with the Semco Style approach, and maybe also, you know, challenge limits, challenge, you know, whatever is coming up. So I'm stoked about it. I'm really excited about that session. And tomorrow we'll also have another LinkedIn live lunch session with Johan Hinterauer on the adaptive org and how we can design participatory org designs. And he will come a little bit out of a different perspective. Like he's, for example, saying, oh, we don't need clarity on accountability, or, you know, this approach is for everyone. So I'm very excited to see what's coming out of there. So any last closing words from you two wonderful people?
I would just say, yeah, experiment with something. see what you learn.
Nice.
Yeah, just to invite everybody that if they want to learn more, just to get in contact with us. I know that I'm talking for me and for Lizzie. Just ask questions or get in contact with us, and we can help you explore this subject. And we've been both passionate of different methodologies, so it's not only about Semco Style. Just get in contact with us and let's talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that also came very clearly out of the session today, that it's not about one approach. It's not, there are so many different ways and taking different kind of tools for different kind of cases. And thank you two so much for that. And yeah, starting this topic off with me, it was a real pleasure. And yeah, I still want to know more about this case you're working on now, Pietro. So I'll get in touch later. So
Yeah, sure.
Thank you guys so much and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Tina.
much.